Good evening, everybody. This is Jesse Austin for Working Class Advocates. If you've ever taken an Introduction to Economics course in the United States at the college or high school level, then there's a good chance that, on top of the usual Austrian school supply side bias, you've also been exposed to this bizarre video series from an organization claiming to be a charity called Stossel in the Classroom. But is this organization really a charity, or is it more of like a think tank for kids designed to indoctrinate them into these laissez-faire, libertarian economic ideologies while they're still young and more pliable? We're going to take a look at some of these videos, and I'll let you decide if this really is a benevolent charity that's just simply informing these kids on a different way of thinking that may benefit them in their business careers, or if it might be something that's dangerous to our kids, and that maybe somebody ought to create a petition on change.org called Get Stossel Out of the Classroom. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our first video here. He's going to try to convince us that it's a good thing that his charitable foundation is convincing kids that price gouging is okay. And as we'll see later, it gets a little darker, but these kids don't know that yet. All right, here's These Students Know More Than Politicians.
Are you smarter than a politician?
Anybody?
The answer is yes, if you are among the millions of students who, thanks to the charity run by this high school teacher, get to watch my videos in class.
Should only take you a couple of minutes.
Greater good.
Actually, not all the videos are mine, but the charity's called Stossel in the Classroom.
All right off the bat, the organization leaves a bad taste in my mouth, right? This charity is showing kids cartoon propaganda videos where there's characters saying, greater good, what a bunch of bullshit, you know? I wouldn't necessarily want my impressionable kids learning this kind of stuff, that like the greater good is this silly utopian thing that we should mock and laugh at. You know, so far, I don't like it. But we're going to continue and see what else is here.
Because I offer free videos to any teacher who wants video teaching aids for courses in economics, government, critical thinking, and current events.
So that's the charity? Free videos in class? I give free videos. What?
Watching and discussing the videos gives kids new perspective on things.
But the people that accept welfare, over time, they lose the incentive to work.
Every year.
Okay, so that's it? New perspective on things. Like, how simplistic. Yeah, it gives them new perspective on, I don't know, things. Well, that's not really that great of a perspective. Oh, welfare makes people not want to work. Based on what? You know, are you teaching kids anything deeper than that? No.
Here we hold an essay contest. Winners get money plus a free trip for them and their teacher to visit us here in New York City. This year's contest invited students to write about price gouging, a practice hated by the media and most politicians.
Jeff Sessions and the President of the United States will not tolerate gouging.
Gouging becomes an issue every hurricane season because after storms, some merchants raise prices.
They're taking advantage of us.
That leads politicians to pass laws that say,
during a state of emergency, you cannot substantially raise prices, whether it's a hotel room, fuel, commodities such as water, generators. You cannot raise prices substantially, and that's what these bad people are doing.
Fortunately, our students get to hear a Nobel Prize-winning economist give the other side of the argument.
No, not fortunately. You know, those students don't get to watch his videos in the classroom. They have to, and then often they have to do a little assignment on it. That won't take them too long.
Should only take you a couple of minutes.
So that's good, I guess. But in any case, kids are being exposed to this stuff. There's not good evidence for it. They're cherry picking the data to arrive at their conclusions, and they're telling these kids, well, you're smarter than a politician if you agree with us. John Stossel's about to cite Milton Friedman positively after what he did to Chile with the Chicago boys.
Gougers deserve a medal.
The Gougers are heroes, said Milton Friedman, because they take risks to bring in goods that people desperately need. After Hurricane Katrina, one so-called gouger was John Shepperson. Watching news reports about Katrina, he learned that people desperately needed things.
My wife just got...
There it is again. Give kids a new perspective on things and disasters. People need things. Maybe They should just get John Stossel videos in the middle of the raging hurricane so that they could have a new perspective on the things that they get, you know? Students get a new perspective on things. People desperately need things. These are very deep thinkers teaching our kids critical thinking and new ideas.
My wife just got out of the hospital, and she's very sick, and we need a generator.
So John bought 19 generators, put them in a rented U-Haul, and drove it 600 miles to part of Mississippi which had no electricity.
5 million people in this region are without power.
John offered to sell his generators for twice what he paid for them.
Okay, so he jacked up the price to double. He took the risk of loading up a U-Haul that he clearly wasn't afraid was going to tip over in the storm or anything. But he loads up this U-Haul with 19 generators and takes the risk to drive it out there. Therefore, price gouging is good, right? No, let's debunk that right now. Because if the warehouse had price gouged him in the first place, then John Jefferson couldn't have bought 12 generators to price gouge the people in distress. Now, could he? No, he wouldn't have been able to buy as many. He wouldn't have been able to load a U-Haul if the U-Haul company were price gouging for the rentals. He would be out of luck, wouldn't he? And then he would be able to help 0 people. If these price gouging laws that Stossel argues are so bad, these regulations that he wants to take away, if we actually took them away, all the large companies would start price gouging. And the higher up the supply chain that they start price gouging, the less opportunity the little guy below has to take the risk to drive out to Mississippi with a U-Haul full of generators.
People were eager to buy.
People were excited. We had a product they needed.
But Mississippi police wouldn't let
One
John
product.
sell them.
See, we had a product, singular, that they needed. But his own video said that people desperately needed things, plural.
People desperately needed things.
See? Product, singular, things, plural. In the disaster, you need generators. Like the guy said, his wife was sick. Medicine, food, and water. But if you gouge them on a generator, then they won't be able to afford the other things. Plural.
That price gouging. Instead, they confiscated his generators and locked John up in this jail. So did the public benefit? No.
What do we need? Come on, guys. Generators. Food.
Somebody needs.
See how they weaponized that clip? All the people said, food, water, generators, food again. So more than one thing, but they're using that clip to say, look, they're in need of generators. So John Jefferson should have been allowed to stay there and provide them with the much needed 19 generators, which of course there are probably more than 19 people in need. And the people most in need, the most desperate people, are going to be the poorest people who don't have a generator already. The richest people who can afford the gouge rate, they bought a generator a while ago when times were good. So they say that gouging helps the people who need the supplies most, but that's a lie because the people who need the supplies most can't afford them and they're priced out of the market by the gougers.
To bring these products to people when there are disasters and emergencies. And this is going to be one person that's not going to be there that they've took out of the equation.
See, but when that person is there to gouge, then that's how many less dollars that people have to spend on other supplies like medicine and food that the gouger has took out of the equation by gouging them for the one generator. Well, then they're screwed when they can't afford the rest of the things they need because they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Students who entered our video essay contest expanded on that point.
In modern day, you see countries like Venezuela suffer from the fact that their governments continue to place price controls on all items.
17-year-old Annalise
Not why they're
Gaffar of
suffering.
Raleigh, North Carolina, submitted this video
Google
and
the sanctions.
won our high school award.
34 of the 50 U.S. states have laws against price gouging.
As I did more and more research, I was like, okay, maybe price gouging isn't such a bad thing.
Erica Lewis of Towson University won the college-level category.
Sellers are able to earn more profit, and buyers are capable of getting the supplies they desperately need.
Actually, the price gougers are the moral ones.
17-year-old Maggie Hransich of Grove City, Pennsylvania, won her high school essay contest.
If you just look at the economics, the most people are helped if you keep the government out of it.
When people hear price gouging, they think, oh, gouging, this awful thing that you'd think of, but it really is kind of just another name for supply and demand.
Wisdom from students helped to look at all sides of the issue by teachers who use our videos. Next year's essay contest will be announced soon. Check out sitc.org for the latest information.
So there you have it. All the libertarian ideas are presented to kids as wisdom. Kids get cash prizes and trips out to wherever to celebrate their video essay win, and they're congratulated for taking on these libertarian ideas that, whether they can really defend them that well or not, if you agree with John Stossel, any argument is good as long as, you put a lot of work into it or whatever. Alright, so after watching the full first video, so far so bad, right? It's like, they're kind of giving kids this direct incentive to think in a specific narrow corridor where less regulations is always the answer, big government is always the problem, and this goes deeper as we're gonna see. It's like, oh yeah, this foundation's a little sketchy, right? But we're not done. We're gonna go deeper down the rabbit hole and see what lies in wait for these kids who make it through this gate, that John Stossel is the gatekeeper for, and what they get to do if they impress these gatekeepers enough, if they, make it in, get grandfathered in, and get jobs on Fox News or wherever it may be, working for the Cato Institute, working for Liberty Think Tank, whoever it is. Now, I gotta warn everybody because this gets pretty disturbing. They call the segment Defending the Undefendable after Walter Block's book. John Stossel apparently admires him a lot. And so here's that video. And we'll see, hey, we're one step away from an actual bona fide think tank, right? Like John Stossel in the classroom, and John Stossel here is talking with David Boaz, right? And here's David Boaz. He's vice president of the Cato Institute, and that's an American libertarian think tank, as you can see. And so they're affiliated with the Koch industries, which, they're responsible for natural gas, fossil fuel investments. You can see some videos on John Stossel's YouTube channel where he's advocating for fracking.
Myth number 5. Our drinking water's in danger because oil companies frack. Frack? What's that?
I'm sure that's not really a coincidence, but we'll go ahead and watch this video called Defending the Undefendable, where they're going to argue for a lot of crazy stuff, actually, and I gotta warn you, it's pretty disturbing, but this is the pipeline that the kids are kind of being led down. This is Liberty Ben with John Stossel, Nick Gillespie, and David Boaz. Here we go. Defending the Undefendable. It's even got the scary, intellectual dark web music.
There's certain things that I was taught and I just assumed were evil. Ticket scalping, price gouging, child labor, insider trading. They're bad. They hurt people, drag the economy down. But then I stumbled across this book.
You were right, John Stossel.
It was like a jungle gym for my brain.
You've been led
Suddenly,
astray
I learned
by
that
Walter Block.
Ticket scalpers don't necessarily cheat people. They provide a valuable service. I learned that some businesses that use what we call child labor actually help children. I learned that so-called price gouging saves lives. So I'm thankful to the author of that book, economist Walter Block, for
They gotta have
turning
some
my
mighty
brain
good
around.
arguments for
I'd
it.
have
then.
him here to defend some of these ideas, except he's in Argentina and couldn't be here tonight.
Aw.
So here to explain these...
Man, Walter Block couldn't even get on Zoom for John Stossel. Or, sorry, this is 13 years old. On Skype, He's over there in Argentina. That libertarian government, by the way, that, is buddy-buddy with Trump. Trump and Javier Milei, they're good friends. So we can see how Argentina produces libertarian economists like Javier Milei and attracts libertarian economists like Walter Block as tourists.
Counterintuitive, but generally really smart libertarian ideas are Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine and David Boaz of the Cato Institute. So one at a time, guys. Child labor. People, say you're going to defend child labor? That's evil.
Look, nobody is going to be using child labor in the United States, in a rich country today. It just doesn't happen, except running lemonade stands, which are being shut down all over the country. There's like a reign of terror against lemonade stands. But in terms of factories, we don't do that anymore because we're rich now. We want our kids to go to school.
And because child labor is wrong.
When we talk about child labor today, we're really talking about very poor countries. We're talking about the third world. And if we say there that the United States should abolish child labor in very poor countries, then what will happen? What will happen to these children? They're not going to suddenly go to Harvard. They're not going to suddenly go to the country day school. Their parents will starve if they don't all work, if the whole family doesn't work. So they may be out selling their bodies on the street. That doesn't seem like an improvement over working in a t-shirt factory.
Okay, so let's think about if this is a good argument or not. It wouldn't be an improvement from the sweatshop if they were out there selling their bodies. First part of his argument was already off to a bad start, right? He's basically being sly about it, but he was saying like, hey, you know, we've gotten spoiled nowadays because before kids would work in mines and textile factories where their arms would get ripped off by the machines, and now we've become a very rich country. We're rich and wealthy now in the United States, so we think that we should get to send our kids to school and give them fancy white-collar jobs where they never lose any of their limbs. But, you know, you gotta be grateful for the wealth that we accumulated and the GDP here in this country because, you know, now we have that opportunity because of capitalism. Of course, he's ignoring that, no, we got there through labor laws. Like, that's why kids aren't getting their arms ripped off in textile factories, because of these labor laws that these people decry. You know, unions fought, and socialist organizations and communist organizations fought for these child labor laws. So right away, he's accrediting the lack of terrible working conditions to wealth and GDP increase instead of, you know, the child labor laws that unions fought for and that they disagree with as libertarians. And then he's also saying, look, it could be worse because they could have to sell their bodies instead of working at a sweatshop making Nike tennis shoes. But then later in the video, they're going to argue that the sex tourism prostitution should be a legal market. They're going to argue for that later. But right here, they're saying it could be worse than a sweatshop. It could be another awful market that we also support as libertarians.
And in fact, where child labor was suddenly banned in these countries, prostitution went up.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, you know, it's not a question of the kids are dying to work, and if they can't work in a factory, they'll become prostitutes. It's that the countries and the people and the families and the kids need the money. They don't have excess money. Everybody is working.
Next.
All right, so Anton Chigurh comes in and says, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's not that they'll have to sell their bodies. That's crazy. What it is these people need money. But wait a minute, Stossel and the Classroom Foundation was teaching kids the great wisdom that welfare is bad and incentivizes them not to work.
But the people that accept welfare, over time, they lose the incentive to work.
So which is it? Are you concerned that these people need money? Or do you hate welfare because it doesn't incentivize these people to work? You'd rather keep them working, even if it's selling their bodies, than to have them on welfare and be freed from that exploitation.
Price gouging. Several states have laws against it. Attorney General Mississippi said this is just people taking advantage of people in need. Price gouging, say, on high prices for something after Hurricane Katrina. Water prices went up. The price of a generator went up.
If I'm in the neighborhood of Hurricane Katrina, what I want is water and ice and generators being plentiful, being in supply there. And if you're in Kentucky and you've got a generator, you've got 10 generators in your store, are you going to get up?
This actually really happened.
Yeah. Are you going to get up at 4 a.m. and drive all night, drive all day to get to Louisiana to sell these generators if you can only sell them for the same price you could sell them for in Kentucky? No, you're going to go down there because demand is higher, need is higher, and you can sell them for more. And the same
even
thing
if it's triple the price.
Even if it's triple the price, because then you'll get triple the generators. you'll get people to work hard to bring these things there. And it is precisely the higher prices that will, number one, cause people to want to make that long drive and get those things where they're needed right now. And number two, will cause people to sell them to people who have the most need, as opposed to just giving them to your daughter, because after all, if it's all the same price, why not give it to your daughter or to a politically connected mayor?
All right, the obvious problem with this argument is that, having generators there physically at a gouge rate is simply the illusion of supply. If half the people can't afford to pay the gouge rate, then what good is having the shelves stocked? They always argue, hey, if you don't gouge, then the products are going to fly right off the shelves during times of emergency. See, they pretend to be concerned about that again. So we have to gouge to keep them on the shelves, right? That way people think twice before they buy something.
Prices allow us to engage in a kind of economic triage, where when we see the price of a $30 flashlight, we might think twice about some of the silly things we might do with flashlights and say, well, maybe we should pass on this one and leave those flashlights for people who really, really need them.
They always argue supply and access is what matters, that these products are there physically on the shelves. But if they're there forever and they're not being sold, then that means that the needs are not being met. Nobody can afford it, and they go, whoa, that's crazy. I'm not paying double the price just because we're in a hurricane. I'll go without a generator. That's what happens. And they're pretending that they're serving the people who most need it, when we all know that the most desperate need rarely ever lines up with the most cash being able to afford these price gouging rates, right? What consumer would buy 19 generators they don't need? Even the wealthy consumers buy 1 or 2 generators, and that's it. No matter how flippantly they use their generators, it's not going to amount to people who buy in bulk with the intention of clearing out the store for the purpose of price gouging others. By now, I'm sure that you already have a pretty strong gut feeling that it doesn't make sense what they're saying, it doesn't add up. But it's really hard to put into words, right? Because there's so many interlocking parts, and they're coming at it from so many different angles all at once. Well, to really highlight the full extent of the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of what they're saying, you gotta kind of put yourself in their mindset a little bit and imagine, well, what would happen if Stossel in the classroom videos were 100% successful, right? The kids are fired up, they're engaged, they come to class, they watch the videos, everybody has this lively debate, and by the end of the class, all the kids are in unison. They're all in agreement with libertarian politics at large and John Stossel's point of view. These kids are internalizing this libertarian message. They're taking it seriously, and the message is, hey, listen, if you want to price gouge during times of desperation, if you want to take goods and services that people desperately need during hurricanes, floods, storms, we support you. We have your back. You are a genius. You deserve a medal. You are the bright, shining future of this generation. Okay? Captain John Stossel supports you. Admiral Ayn Rand has your back, brother. General Milton Friedman wants you to price gouge for this country. You're doing a wonderful thing, son. Don't ever give up that entrepreneurial spirit and do our country proud. And I'll tell you right now, folks, my hands are tied. I don't have a choice. I have to liken Stossel in the classroom to a military academy because of what Milton Friedman said, right? He said price gougers, quote, deserve a medal, unquote.
Gougers deserve a medal.
And that's what they're telling your kids. So while I apologize in advance, because it's going to get a little weird as we continue to lean into the military academy metaphor, you can go ahead and blame Milton Friedman and John Stossel for that, okay? Just try to remember that they're the reason this is all happening. Proceeding right along with the thought experiment, the kids readily absorb the message. They want to be heroes for the free market. They may dutifully respond to the call to action like this. Yes, sir. Thank you, John Stossel, sir. I used to believe the Marxist propaganda, sir. But your carefully thought out high production value Stossel in the classroom videos have opened my eyes and showed me that America is not so bad, sir. I promise that I will not take this opportunity to redeem myself lightly, sir. I now have the wisdom to see the current situation as an economic opportunity instead of a humanitarian tragedy, sir. Thank you for giving me another chance, sir. With God as my witness, I solemnly swear to price gouge as many people as humanly possible, sir. I swear that I will take economic risks that make the great General Milton Friedman proud, sir. I promise to publicly and fiercely challenge every dangerous socialist idea that threatens our American capitalist way of life whenever I may hear it, sir. And finally, I solemnly swear that I will never stop pushing myself and my business to every earthly limit so that I may earn my rank and status as a true hero of the free market, so help me God! So, not the greatest thing for their mental health. Now Sam's Club doesn't have any toilet paper, etc. So it really is kind of like a military academy in that sense, right? Because first, John Stossel inspires a generation of working class youth to become entrepreneurs, get out there and be heroes for the free market and price gouge, right? They get that message. They're laying in wait for opportunities to take advantage of. The COVID pandemic rolls around. They're like, this is my chance. I'm going to prove that I have what it takes to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to grind my way to the top, and John Stossel is going to be proud of me. He's going to have my back. But then John Stossel doesn't have their back. Then he gets on Fox News and says, can you believe somebody bought up all the product during a disaster? How disgraceful. There are people who really need it out there. Who could have done this? Could it have been my students who I told were honorable for buying up all the product and, selling it at a premium and price gouging? No, it probably wasn't them. It was the consumers. They were panic buying. Yes, they were. They were buying things they didn't really need. They were buying flashlights. I was talking about it with my friend on Fox News, and, people buy flashlights they don't really need. They do dumb things with them. Ooh, look at me. I'm John Stossel. I have a mustache. Happens all the time. Nothing we could do about it. But yeah, all these consumers buying up all the flashlights and doing incredibly stupid things with them.
When we see the price of a $30 flashlight, we might think twice about some of the silly things we might do with flashlights.
Oh, don't get it twisted. Buying them all in bulk just to sell them at an insane premium to make a buck while people are suffering, that's not one of the stupid things you might do with a flashlight that you'd buy. We're talking about other stupid things. That you're good. You're a good guy for buying up the flashlights and selling them. We want you to keep price gouging, but we are also going to complain about the shelves that you emptied. And, we're going to get on TV and say the solution to empty shelves is for the supplier above you to price gouge so that he can keep his shelves full, even though we know that's going to hurt your business model, which is kind of messed up because, we got you on this whole entrepreneurship kick in the first place. And now we're just, pulling the ladder up from under it, And by the time anybody realizes that they've been fighting a civilian population and their only crime was that they wanted to maintain national control over their precious resources, it's too late, and there's already a brand new, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed generation ready to go. They're ready to become entrepreneurs now, and the whole cycle repeats itself. There's yet another argument that you're probably going to hear in favor of price gouging that uses the supply and demand curve. So we'll take a moment and go through that one as well. The argument usually goes like this. And Mr. David Boaz said, hey, 3 times the price gouge, that's 3 times the incentive. 3 times the generators.
Even if it's triple the price, because then you'll get triple the generators.
It's 3 times the product. So I guess we'll go ahead and put 3P and 3Q there respectively for now. But in their argument, they say, hey, listen, if you let the government come in and start enforcing all these price gouging laws, what that's going to do is it's going to function as a price ceiling. The market's going to be confined to this little tiny trapezoid down here, which is terrible because it won't reach equilibrium. The sellers can't sell what they want to sell, and the buyers can't buy as much as they want to buy. It's a bad situation for everyone. So we're told. When the government comes in and enforces their price gouging laws, they're creating this shortage. It's the difference between the elevated demand when the demand curve shifts right and the measly supply that the sellers are willing to muster up at the production level that they can maintain at that profit margin, at that revenue. Don't you understand? They have upkeep. They're not making enough sales. They're not making enough money at P1 anymore. Their bills are piling up. They're pumping water out of their basement.
The store that sold us this $30 flashlight wasn't having an easy time. They didn't have power. They were pumping water from their basement at the time. Right, and that's an important point. For the store owner, it's pretty obvious that they've got some other issues to deal with, like pumping out their basement.
So the government created a shortage. We're upset. And equilibrium point, well, it's probably somewhere up there around 2 or 3p. I mean, disaster. People are desperate.
Demand is higher, need is higher, and you can sell them for more.
In any case, we're certain that this is what's going on. It's a situation of a price ceiling that's preventing us from reaching market equilibrium. While the market dynamics themselves serve as a tiny grain of truth in this argument, we can begin to see how it's sort of like a reversible jacket, and there's nothing that stops us from flipping it on its head. For example, you could easily, and a lot more justifiably in my opinion, argue that a graph like this more accurately represents the most meaningful market dynamics at play when consumers are being price gouged during a disaster. When disaster first strikes, the demand curve really does shift to the right at first. I said there was a grain of truth. But once sellers start gouging, then the demand curve shifts back to the left. This happens because buyers are exercising their buying power in response to the gouging, and they're trying to make the price come down a little bit by buying less. And with this model, we're trying to describe how once a significant threshold of sellers out there on the market listen to John Stossel and other libertarian arguments in favor of price gouging, and then try to apply those economic misconceptions in their own businesses by price gouging, the net effect is virtually identical to price fixing. Once too many sellers start gouging, they collectively start to form a sort of price floor that restricts the market to this upper trapezoid, which also keeps us away from equilibrium. And it creates a market surplus, which would explain why the shelves remain stocked when sellers choose to gouge during a disaster. This model is more accurate and comprehensive because, first of all, it acknowledges that even during times of a disaster where the equilibrium point might be above P, 2P and 3P are still far more likely to be found above the equilibrium point, not on it. Furthermore, this supply and demand curve also more cleanly models those scenarios where people who were priced out before can suddenly afford to buy because the government has enacted price gouging laws. That would suggest that a price floor was what was in the way. That was the reason we couldn't achieve market equilibrium. It wasn't a price ceiling after all. In this model, the government ironically becomes the one who has to save the market from the private sector by removing the price floor so that the market can attain equilibrium again. So, contrary to what you might hear out there, no, invoking supply and demand alone is not enough to prove that price gouging is justified. Not even economically. Alright folks, we skipped ahead a little bit. This is the grand finale. This is where it all leads to, and we're gonna see if we really want Stossel in the classroom, given that this is the ideology that the kids are being driven towards ultimately. Legalizing sin, gambling, prostitution, the organ harvesting market, everything, which kind of odd since, John Stossel famously hates China and they're often accused of having an organ harvesting trade that's underground, illegal. I guess John Stossel would agree with it if it were legal and not regulated, but unregulated, deregulated, like every other industry. Libertarians, their answer is always deregulate. They agree with legalizing marijuana, so you could theoretically smoke the weed that you couldn't afford while living in a corporate town and having no rights. But here they go, they're gonna argue for pretty much everything. And here you'll be able to see how much I wasn't exaggerating earlier when I said it gets a little darker, but these kids don't know that yet. If you pay close attention here, you can actually see for a split second in John's face that he's a little bit disappointed in his audience, and you can see in his face he's like, oh man, really guys, like you're that low, you don't even need to hear an argument for it, you're already rah ready to cheerlead for all these nasty things. Watch his face. Just for a split second you can see it.
And finally, you both say we should legalize sin, basically. Drug use, prostitution, gambling.
So an interesting crowd you have.
A lot of people, unusual libertarian crowd, but most non-libertarians would say that's indefensible.
No, it isn't. First off, when it comes to owning your own body and what you do with consenting adults, nobody should be able to stand in the way of that as a basic principle. But then beyond that, even if you don't believe that, you have to look at what's the cost of prohibiting this? What's the cost of regulating it? And in each of those cases, the harms done by the regulations are far worse than the activities themselves.
What should be illegal is inflicting harm on other people, violating their rights. And so putting drugs in your own body, gambling with your own money, these things are not the government's business. In a free society, adults should be able to do that.
There you have it. Nick Gillespie, David Boaz, and John Stossel all in agreement that, the government should just get out of everything, and you show us some kind of evil activity that you think is twisted and dark, and we'll give you an explanation for why we should just allow that sort of thing and deregulate it so that nobody ever gets in trouble for it. That's kind of a dangerous ideology that I'd say I wouldn't want my kids exposed to. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Stossel in the Classroom is in fact not a charity. And John Stossel is not providing these videos to educators out of the goodness of his heart, out of a true, genuine desire to teach kids critical thinking and broaden their perspectives. I'm gonna say it's a junior think tank, and he's doing this to try to manipulate the way kids think about government, about markets, and about politics.
Education choice doesn't have to end with school.
Even now that I graduated high school, I'm not watching Stossel in the classroom there, but I'm watching Stossel at home.
Under the admittedly noble guise of teaching children hard work, wisdom, entrepreneurship, and free thinking, John Stossel is in fact narrowing their worldview, and he's encouraging them to reject a certain way of thinking outright and to accept on the authority from Milton Friedman that libertarian ideas are the best ideas out there. But I want to know what you think. Is Stossel in the Classroom a benevolent charity for the benefit of these kids, or is it more of a sinister, underhanded brainwashing method, like a radicalization pipeline to groom kids into libertarian ideology while they're young so that they might be more likely to advocate for more extreme ideas when they're older?
If I'm wrong about this, what else am I wrong about?
So let us know your thoughts in the comments. Till next time, this has been Working Class Advocates. I'm Jesse Austin. Workers of the world unite. Now love you all. Have a good night.